So welcome everyone to our second class on financial management. So last class we have started discussing about financial management, and when we talked about financial management, primarily first I explained you what finance is all about, and there I discussed dividing the finance under three verticals. I talked about finance can be public finance, it can be private finance, or it can be individual finance. So it can be public finance, it can be private finance, and sorry, the third one would be corporate finance. So primarily in the subject called financial management, we'll focus more on corporate finance. Talking about public finance and individual finance or private finance, we'll discuss a majority of the portion in our third semester of our MBA. Probably if you people will take MBA, will definitely will do the continuation of lot of concepts what we are doing right now, and simultaneously will focus there also. Simultaneously there also will focus on the corporate finance. So whatever we are doing right now, financial management, this the more or less similar concept will be continued the third semester. So right now the concept of finance what we are studying will focus more on the corporate perspective. So when we look into the domain of what financial management is all about. So when we look into financial management, it's more or less it's a managerial decision. When I talk in the perspective of corporate finance, so the decisions what the management of the company can take, those are CXOs of the company, which talks about the planning and controlling of the firm financial resources. So how we utilize the financial resources of the firm. Resources can be human resource, it can be inventory, it can talks about or any other tangible intangible assets what the company can have. A company can have real assets also, so the different forms of an assets a company can have. Probably it's always makes sense the term of ROI and ROI and ROE, return on investment and return on equity. So as a firm, it's always important that we can create such kind of capabilities, those kind of capabilities.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, tell me.
Sir, Chaitra is waiting, sir. You have to accept her.
I can't see Chaitra here. Chaitra is still, I don't know. Chaitra is not there in the waiting also.
Okay, fine.
So here we are talking about the financial management, and when we talk about financial management, every firm like in order to survive, in order to compete, it's very important that a firm in along with their usual way of functioning, they need to create an additional demand for their product in the market. There should always be demand for their product in the market. The demand can be backed by the real reason, maybe because of need, or the demand can be backed by want. So when we talk about want, then the proper sales promotion strategies related to advertisement can be done effectively to make sure that product demand always exists. So there are a lot of products when we talk about soft drinks, when we talk about junk foods, which are not at all should be the part of our lifestyle. But even then, because of too much aggressive marketing strategies of their company, we always see a demand for the product in the market. So ultimately the ideology with what any firm works is to earn profit. So the to earn profit, earning profit is the ideology with which any firm works. So here the initially also when we see the history of this subject called financial management, many people, many author, many analysts, they used to put this subject financial management under economics. And Adam Smith also in his book The Wealth of Nation, he talked about every company should work on maximizing their profit. Okay, so in operation research also, when we see the objective function, we talked about the objective function, how we can maximize our profit. So profit altogether, when we see the word profit altogether look greediness. When we say profit, profit comes with exploitation. Okay, so when we see profit, we see profit should be something, it can be also, it can be making others as a colonies, as what we saw in the history in 17th, 18th, 19th century. when companies like Dutch East India Company or East India Company, they aggressively went all around the world and with on the name of trade and making others weaker economies as their colonies, and they exploited the raw material, the resources, human or natural resources for the betterment or the development of themselves. So the profit as such does not suit well in the present corporate era. So nowadays you will not find any company which talk about the goal, vision, mission, where they talk about the term called profit. So they try to avoid the word profit. So here nowadays when we talk about a company, the companies usually talk in of 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 a human resource development. The company nowadays talks about corporate social responsibility. So profit as such cannot be used as an objective of a company. So when we say profit, also profit itself is not very clear word, because when you use the word profit, whenever you are using the word profit, profit can be many things. Profit can be either gross profit, if you're using the word profit as an objective. So you need to clear what is the objective, as in you want to maximize the gross profit, or you want to maximize the operating profit, or you want to maximize the net profit. So that itself you need to clear also. So what form of profit are you talking about? So if I talk about gross profit is nothing but from your revenue if you subtract your cost of goods sold. So from your revenue if you subtract your cost of goods sold, so there we talk in the term of gross profit. So cost of goods sold is more or less is the direct cost, what is required. Okay, so in your manufacturing setup, so the direct cost related to your purchase or related to your inventory, all that forms the cost of goods sold. So such kind of companies which are into direct manufacturing, for them cost of goods sold plays a very significant factor. But if a company is not into direct manufacturing, maybe they're just a service provider, they're buying one product from one end and they're selling to the other end. So for them COGS does not create much significance. So maybe for them operating profit is much more significant factor. So you cannot set an objective as in like you want to maximize your gross profit, then you may can talk about operating profit. So when we say operating profit, what basically we discuss under operating profit, that once you deduct the COGS from the revenue, then you try to deduct your indirect expenses or fixed cost from your revenue. So after direct cost, you try to deduct indirect cost. So direct cost plus indirect cost, which is also fixed cost plus variable cost. If you try to deduct all the forms of cost from the revenue, then the net figure what you will get, will call that as a operating profit. So if you say that maximize my operating profit, so if I'm saying that my objective as in firm is to maximize my operating profit, so again that does not satisfy the criteria, that does not give a better picture firm in the future. Why, guys? Please understand that from revenue, if you subtract your COGS, so you get gross profit. So from revenue, if you subtract your COGS, you get gross profit. Now, when we talk about gross profit, now from gross profit, if I subtract all my indirect expenses, all my indirect expenses, so including fixed costs and all. So if I deduct my all indirect expenses, so I'll get operating profit. So I'll get operating profit. The another name of operating profit is also EBITDA. The another name of operating profit is EBITDA. What is EBITDA? Earning before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So all the forms of cost you simply deducted from revenue. That is what we know now from traditionally from childhood. If anyone asks you what is profit, profit is nothing but revenue minus cost. So if I subtract all the forms of cost from the revenue, so then the figure what I'll get, the net figure what I get is the operating profit. So when I say operating profit, as in operating profit is my objective, then you say, okay, great, you are talking operating profit, right? I'll say, yeah, I'm talking about operating profit. So as in my objective, I want to maximize my operating profit. So there are two firms are there. So in one firm has a better operating profit than the other firm. So does it mean that the other firm is better because the firm which is having more operating profit is better than the firm which is having less operating profit? So in this perspective, you will say, yeah, that in that case, definitely it would be. But logically, that is not 100% correct, because you need to understand a term called more risk, more return. So there's a term which is very common when you study the language of finance. That term is more risk, more return. So how you get this value of a operating profit? How you got that? So that in order to get that, you need to also look into the capital structure. The capital structure, the way you raised money in the past. Okay, what is the end of your liability side? Here you're only talking asset side. Liability side is the fund what you are having right now is only totally backed by equity, or it can be backed by some extent of debt also into that. So when I only talk about operating profit as in the maximization of operating profit, I'm simply ignoring the financial decision what the firm has taken in the past. So the financial decision as in the what financial decision a firm has taken in the past when the firm wanted to generate revenue. So when the firm wanted to generate revenue, so what all financial decision the firm has taken in the past, maybe I'm simply ignoring that financial decision, because as in firm, when we look into a firm, if a firm talks about different forms of investment decision, a firm talks about different forms of functions, a firm talks about long-term decision, short-term decision. In the long-term decision, there's a decision comes which we call as financial decision. So financing decision talks about in the past, when we look into the business model of the company, the way the company has functioned till now. So we also need to look into the ownership pattern of the company, how much ownership pattern is acquired by whom. Okay, and based upon that, we need to understand the topology of the company. So financing decision talks about that when you look into the liability side of the balance sheet, so how much is the proportion of debt equity? So that's why there's a ratio which has become very important, which is called debt equity ratio. So when we talk about debt equity ratio, imagine that firm is more or less backed by debt only. I hope you're understanding. There's a firm which is equity backed firm, which we also call as unlevered firm. There's a firm which is levered firm, which have certain proportion of equity, certain proportion of debt. Whenever you have a debt in your capital structure, the debt always come with a risk. That risk we call as a financial risk. So whenever you have a debt in your capital structure, you have a risk. That risk is called financial risk. That risk is called default risk. Okay, what is that risk, sir? That risk says that no matter you get a profit or no matter you get loss in the future, the interest, which is the cost of debt which you have committed to pay, you need to pay. So whenever you have when you have little bit imbalance in debt equity ratio, that talks about the long term viability of the company, solvency of the company. So there's a model which is very famous model, which is Altman Z score model. So Altman Z score model calculate the probability that the company will get bankrupt in the future. So if you get time, you read about Altman Z score model. So when we talk about Altman Z score model, that Altman Z score model talks about the probability that the company will get bankrupt in the future. So when you talk about that probability that the company will get bankrupt in the future, so there we look into consideration of many ratios. We look into the consideration of many ratios like working capital to total asset ratio, retained earning to total asset ratio, then EBIT by total asset ratio, market value of equity by total liability ratio, total sales by total asset ratio, and then we calculate the Z score model of the company by put some coefficients before each ratios, and that actually gives us what is the probability that a company can bankrupt in the future. And in that, the solvency or the debt in your capital structure plays very significant role, guys, because from here, once you deduct your non-cash expense like depreciation, amortization, then the very important factor which you need to deduct is the interest. The very important factor which you need to deduct is the interest. and interest you need to pay no matter you get a profit or you get a loss, and ultimately you get is earning after tax. So after earning after tax, whatever you get from this, you'll pay dividend to your shareholder if you want. That is also not a compulsion. And plus the remaining money which you retain with yourself, that is called as retained earning. So we'll discuss about retained earning and all in future. But for the time being, guys, you need to understand that as such, when we see an objective of the firm, so the objective of the firm, on what parameter we can decide the objective of the firm. So we cannot talk about that the objective of firm as in maximization of profit. Why not ethically? I talked about ethically. We cannot talk about right now talking of profit. If any company nowadays in newspaper or media outlet, if you see any company talking about the term profit, then automatically they will come under the radar of social activists, or they get the radar of political activists. They come into the radar of lot of regulatory agencies, income tax authorities. So because profit, if you really want to talk about the profit, then here you need to also understand how you get the profit. What is the perspective of getting that the profit? So whenever we use the word profit, automatically environment, automatically that what you say human resource factor, automatically accounting mismanagement, all that start coming into the mind of many individuals. Because if I say okay, fine, I'll not talk about maximization of operating profit, I'll talk about maximization of net profit. Okay, then it's fine, then it's fine. So there you say that I'll take into account of interest also. Interest is the cost what you pay on the debt. So then you'll say, okay, now I'll talk about the maximization of net profit. So is that really make some sense as a firm to you, as in shareholders? Are you really now interested to invest in my company? Like, I hope you heard of yesterday only the article came where it's there now the news that Paytm is coming up with largest IPO in our country. The IPO is around 16,600 crore. So Paytm is coming with the largest IPO of around 16,600 crore in our economy. So last time, till now, the largest IPO in our country was around 15,400 crore rupees IPO, which was done by Coal India in 2010. Okay, now after that, Paytm, whose current valuation as per the market is around 16 to 20 billion dollar. So now they're coming up with an IPO where they're valuing themselves as in 25 to 30 billion dollar, and from there that they're going to raise, they're planning to come during Diwali time, and they're planning to raise around 16,600 crore rupees IPO. Okay, so what is IPO? So if you see, IPO is all about raising money from the public. So you once you transform yourself from a private company to public company. So if you transform yourself from a private company to a public company, and instead of going and raising money from the private equity firms, you want to raise money from the public. Okay, so guys, if you really see the shareholding pattern of Paytm is actually the foreign company. We think Paytm is an Indian company. The Vijay Shankar Sharma, who is the current head of Paytm, who started Paytm, Vijay Sharma something is his name is Vijay Sharma, who started Paytm. So his ownership is only around 15 to 16%. Okay, so his ownership is only around 15 to 16. Vijay Shekhar Sharma, so his ownership is only around 15 to 16%. Okay, the majority of ownership in Paytm is by Ant Group. It's a Chinese private equity firm. Then it hold by Alibaba. So you can see Paytm as such. We think it's a Indian tech giant, but it's actually is backed by foreign companies. And when Paytm is coming with an IPO, so for what Paytm want to raise money from the public. Okay, Paytm want to raise money from the public, and surprisingly, if you see the balance sheet PNL of Paytm, they are into loss. Okay, if you see the same thing with Baiju, like probably now everyone is expecting that Baiju will will surpass Paytm, and Baiju will become the world, not world, India largest tech giant. So because Baiju is getting a lot of investment from lot of private equity firms around the world. So they're saying that Baiju is now going to become the India largest tech giant. So Baiju, again, if you look into the P&L balance sheet of a Baiju, you will see lot of loss figures. They are doing aggressively marketing. They are acquiring, recently they acquired Akash Educational. Okay, that more into IIT JE net coaching. Then they acquired Topper. So they are the junior Whitehead Junior. So like that, lot of acquisition. Baiju is right now currently doing with the fund what the Baiju is getting from the other private equity firms. So Baiju is trying to become kind of a single monopolistic player in comes to online education, and also in offline also they are coming more in aggressively into tuition business and other things. I'm not going to talk more about Baiju business model. So the purpose of telling you is that these firms, although you see their valuation as $20 billion and all, but when you see their profit, when you see the net profit and all, they always show very less data of that profit, very minimal data of the profit, as in the majority they'll show as in cost only, because they are aggressively doing lot of they are doing lot of expenses in terms of marketing or in terms of advertisement. So till what extent they're doing, what form of valuation model we are doing to calculate the forms of depreciation or the forms of expenses what they're incurring, that itself need to be is that itself need to be investigated. But even then, we value these firms depending upon the future private price equity ratio, depending upon the future viability in the henceforth, considering that, yeah, definitely they'll have value in the future, definitely they'll become the dominant player in the Indian economy sector, which no one in the world knows. So if you see the companies like Facebook, once upon a time when they did the IPO becomes such a huge successful. Then now Facebook is become such a popular company. So Facebook was basically a social media platform. From that, the kind of innovations they are doing again, acquiring Instagram and other things. So that way, if you see them, the kind of new R&D they're coming up, where you see nowadays you can get a job in Facebook. Nowadays, you can read articles in Facebook. So they're coming with new platforms, and that way, because of search engine optimization, or because of the kind of time and in user invest in Facebook, where Facebook try to give them end solution of all their problems, what they're looking for. So that way, the tech giant like Google, Facebook are satisfying the need of the customer, and they're getting what you say, one of the dominant player when we talk about digital marketing concept, or when we talk about online marketing segment. But again, when same thing, when we expect from Baiju or Paytm, still we need to figure it out, how dominating they're actually working aggressively on their R&D front. So the talking about forgetting about Baiju or forgetting about Paytm, now talking about the objective, as an objective of the firm, what we need to look into. So objective of firm, I don't think it can be the maximization of gross profit, neither it can be the maximization of the operating profit, neither it can be maximization of the net profit. So what problem with the net profit? Guys, we need to understand that when we look into the profit and loss statement of the company, okay, so in order to get that net figure, whatever the what you say, the profit after tax is there for the company. So in order to generate that data, lot of accounting adjustments are done. Certain accounting adjustments are non-cash expenses like depreciation, amortization. When you see depreciation, amortization, they are basically non-cash expenses. Okay, so the depreciation amortization you deduct from your operating profit. Okay, and then before you pay the tax. So actually, if you see depreciation amortization, they're non-cash expense. As in, non-cash expense means what? Actually, that money has not moved out from the book of account of the company. Nowhere that money has went. Whatever the value you put for depreciation amortization, whatever figure you account for depreciation amortization, as an account student, we know that that data has not went anywhere. But why you do that adjustment? Because you know that somewhere in the future, when if I try to sell my fixed assets in the market, definitely I will not get the value at which I bought at the historical cost, whatever the value I got. So I cannot get that same value. Ultimately, I know that because of wear and tear, the value of the fixed asset, whatever I have, is decreasing day by day. So I before only I make accounting of that year on year basis, so that I can have a net realized value or net block value of the fixed asset what I have. But these non-cash expenses, when we see, we do this adjustment so that we end up in paying less tax. So these are basically the accounting adjustments we are doing. Okay, so this accounting adjustments ultimately help us to pay less tax. Okay, at the same time, when you see revenue of the company, so as per the accounting standards what we follow, we can even record the revenues. Which are backed by credit sales. So sales can be either cash sales, or the sales can be either credit sales. So these forms of revenues which are even backed by credit sales, we can even record those also in when we make a financial statement of the company. So about their what you say receivability, that we need to check. So like the provision of NPA and all, non-performing assets. So nowadays, especially for banks and all, how much NPA becomes such a factor, non-performing asset. Also, how much they become such a critical factors when we see the viability of the company, the non-performing assets. So assuming that ultimately these credit sales will able to get back the money, whatever the forms of product we sold on a credit, because that is how the business model right now is working. So there's nothing wrong with selling the product on credit, because every firm works on their working capital management principle, where the rules of debtors and creditors become very significant. So in that way, there's nothing wrong with the credit cycle, the credit sales made by the company. What ultimately matters is the probability to get that money. So as an account receivable, how much forms of your account receivables actually you receive, and how much actually went to the NPA. Because if you end up in getting NPA, then you need to make a provision also for NPA, okay, in your financial statement. And again, those provisions for NPA will ultimately will create more question mark about your financial viability in the long run. So all this accounting adjustments, the top line, the bottom line accounting adjustments, do not talk about the cash position of the company. So in order to talk about the cash position of the company, we need to look into the cash flow statement of the company, which talks about how much cash is going in and out because of investing activities, or that is going in and out because of financial activities, or it is going in and out because of of any other activities in which the firm can actually engage into. And all this basically talks about the cash position of the company. Cash position, the cash flow of the company is very important parameter which we need to look into the firm. So imagine if the company is facing liquidity issue, then what will happen to the firm? Think about a firm like Lehman Brothers. I really don't know how much you have heard of Lehman Brothers. So there's a 158-year-old bank, investment banking company, Lehman Brothers. On 18th September 2008, if I'm not wrong, 2008 or 9. So it got bankrupt. World fifth largest investment banking company in the world, Lehman Brothers. Okay, 158-year-old bank, Lehman Brothers, in bankruptcy in 2008, it got bankrupt. Okay, so the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers actually started this bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers has actually started the series of global meltdown around the world. When we say 2008 subprime crisis or extra leverage crisis, US crisis, when we talk about, okay, so this all started because of the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers. sorry, 15 September 2008. This all started with the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, which was the climax of subprime mortgage crisis. So if you really want to know about subprime mortgage crisis, financial meltdown, I'll sometime in the future I'll take a class on that and I'll explain you these parameters. What is chapter 1 of chapter 11 of US bankruptcy law? All that we'll discuss sometime in the future. But if you're really interested, please read about them. Make yourself more impactful with when it comes to financial knowledge. Okay, so why the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers happened? In YouTube, you will get a lot of videos also about a Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. Richard S. Flood, who was the CEO of the bank Lehman Brothers at that time. So how he was responsible for the bankruptcy. What about other firms who also reached the possibility of bankruptcy, like Merrill Lynch? Okay, so there are a lot of then the lot of insurance companies were there. So, but they could not get bankrupted. Okay, Bear Stearns, lot of firms were there. So why Lehman Brothers only got bankrupt? So all that you'll understand if you read the history of Lehman Brothers and why you are talking about, sir, right now. Because why right now when you are talking about the cash flow, liquidity, why you are talking about Lehman Brothers, sir? Because Lehman Brothers was the such a big firm. If you see the balance sheet of a Lehman Brothers, it has bankruptcy. If you see the reason balance sheet, if you see the reason why Lehman Brothers got bankrupt, it's only because of liquidity problem. They don't have liquidity to manage their current expenses. 1991, 1991, India. I hope you have heard of liberalization, privatization, globalization. The first thing is what is being taught to us when we come to MBA. I also remember when I started preparing for MBA. So the first thing I was looking for in Google or newspaper was to know about LPG. So 1991, what revolutionary happened in our country. So what revolutionary happened, we know what revolutionary happened. But why it happened? Because India does not have liquidity to even to manage 2 weeks of import. So because we went to IMF asking for more loan. Okay, we went to IMF asking for more loan. We said we need more money, we need debt. IMF said that I'm not going to give you loan, I'm not going to give you the money. So if you really want money, you need to open your economy. So after Second World War, when the world was on the bricks of Cold War situation between USSR and USA, India, in order to neutralize the situation, India adopted the ideology of mixed economy. Although India always followed a socialistic outlook, so India never allowed its economy for the foreign players. So companies like Coca-Cola and all, they tried a lot in the past to enter into our economy, but they could not able to enter because of the economic policies which were there in India before 1981. But at finally at 1981, when we had no money in our balance of payment. Okay, so then that time when we went to the IMF, International Monetary Fund, for the short-term loans, they rejected our proposal, and finally we had to open our economy. So these all you need to understand, guys. These all are interrelated. All these events, the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi. Okay, so if you these all are well connected, guys. You need to read little bit of geopolitics. You need to read little bit of economics. You need to know little bit of finance to connect the dots. If you have seen a movie called Madras Cafe, there they give you little bit of what actually has happened. All these are very interrelated, and you'll know more about how. First of all, we there if you really are very interested, read about why LTTE were against Rajiv Gandhi, why they were unhappy with Rajiv Gandhi. So when they were unhappy with Rajiv Gandhi, why some people who are sitting in Singapore or other part of developed economy, why they funded, it's just a controversy. So it's why they funded LTT against the assassination of our late Prime Minister, and how that is connected with LPG in our country. So you have to aware about, if you get time, read about them, get yourself more knowledgeable. Don't see the picture only in one dimension. You need to know the other dimension of the picture to know more about what would have happened. No one knows with 100% certainty, but yeah, but they are there are certain issues, there are certain global powers which are actually dominating the world economy. You believe it or not believe it, but yeah, we are getting impacted. Even if dollar get changed by 1 basis point also, if dollar rupee changed by some values, if something happened to Mexican peso, or maybe some Swiss franc, any currency, any part of world, if it happens, nowhere, no matter how much I'm aware or not aware, but it definitely gonna impact us. So it's something which we should be aware about. Something which is happening in Afghanistan right now, when the US troops left Afghanistan, it's gonna impact us in very long run, and we need to start seeing the impact of that. So if you know, then also well and good. If you don't know, also it's well and good. But ultimately, it impacts the business model of every firms which are operating in our country. So when we see the firm around us, when we see how they should function, so no, definitely the objective of the firm cannot be related to the profit. So going beyond profit, when we see how a firm basically works in our country, so every firm, uh, they can be started with your own money. You can start a firm. It's always good that in our country, we should encourage venture capitalism, we should encourage seed funding, we should encourage entrepreneurship. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we're starting a firm, by putting our capital, so then that capital what we are putting in the firm, that act like a liability for the firm. You know why? Dual entity concept. So these funds what you're putting into the firm, maybe it can be your fund, which is a shareholder equity, what we call, or that can be borrowed from the outside market in the form of debt. The sum total of that is called as these capital, what you have raised, ultimately what we'll do with that capital, ultimately with that capital we'll work on our production, we work on our marketing, we work on our finances. So again, HR is also there. We need to also talk about human resource, otherwise Sane will feel bad. I'm just joking. So human resource nowadays play very significant role. Okay, so these are the 4 pillars of a firm. So the divisions like production, marketing, finance, and human resource, these all are the 4 divisions of the firm, or they are the 4 pillars of the firm on which the firm basically works. And whatever the capital the firm generate by debt or equity, ultimately the firm will engage them, so that ultimately they can have better value for the firm in the future. So every firm works with the sole idea or sole objective of generating returns. So generating return or getting a better value in the future will make lot of sense to the firm. So that ultimately what we do, these funds what we have raised, will gradually use these funds under these departments to generate real and financial assets for the firm. So these real and financial assets, what we have raised, these real and the financial assets, what we have raised, these real and financial assets, what we have raised. 1 minute. So these real and the financial assets, what we have raised, so these real and financial assets will help the firm to survive in the long run. So these assets, what are these assets, how we can talk about the depreciation, what are the hybrid form of financing are right now are actually involved in the business cycle, we should be aware about. So hybrid financing like lease financing, or purchase hire mechanism, all that are very common nowadays in the market. And with these facilities, ultimately somehow we can minimize our initial investment. So because whenever we talk about any policies, with which we can engage in our operating activities, we need to put lot of capital all together. So if we really want to save ourselves from putting a lot of capital all together, we can even acquire an asset on a lease financing mechanism. So where there is a lessor, LESSOR, so lessor will give his asset to us for a definite time period, and we can use that his his or her asset for the time period. We can use his or we can use his or her assets for this definite time period, and by using his or her asset for the definite time period, what we try to do, we try to generate a cash inflow for the firm in the future. And that way, ultimately, we can make sure that the firm have a long-term viability. No need to buy everything as a firm. No need, you actually no need a lot of investment to be born on a lot of fixed assets. Okay, so that you can generate revenue, so that you can generate cash inflow in the future. You can even come up with a hybrid financing model, where we can acquire an asset for a definite time period. We can buy that asset, and then probably once the requirement of the asset is done, then we can return back the asset, and that way our work can be done. So nowadays firms, majority of the firms, they talk about this hybrid financing model. So because ultimately, guys, you need to understand the parameter of leverage. The leverage what the firm can take. The leverage can be either operating leverage. When we talk about leverage, a firm can take, it can be either operating leverage. The leverage what the firm can take, it can be either operating leverage, or it can be either financial leverage. So when we say operating leverage basically talks about the proportion in which the firm raise its cost. In what proportion a firm raises cost. So in variable cost and fixed cost, in what proportion. And because nothing in this world comes for free, right? You need to pay a cost. Okay, that cost what you're paying to generate revenue. Okay, so in what proportion you raise that cost? Like imagine I'm a teacher and I want to start IIT JEE Institute in Bangalore. So how should I start? Should I take one big commercial place and do lot of investment and on glass or lightning, all that, and then I should start with the coaching class? Or can I start with some rented apartment, okay, or with minimal investment of board or chalk or something? And then probably if I get students, imagine if the people like me, they come to me to my institute, and if definitely if things go up to my expectation, then gradually I can do investment, and then gradually depends upon the revenue what I'm generating, I can talk about investment in fixed assets. And that way if I do business, I think that will make more sense. But again, every business model is different from the other business model. What I'm using right now in the case of my coaching industry, where I'm trying to put more money on variable cost and less money on fixed cost, the same thing I cannot use when I talk about, suppose if I want to work on a business model where I want to start a hospital. So you cannot start a hospital on a rented place with minimum machines, with doctors on what you say rented basis. Like if any patient come, we'll call a doctor, tell okay this patient has came, can you come and check him? So thus such thing does not exist there. So yeah, every business model is different from each other. So probably the proportion of variable and fixed cost ultimately talks about the initial investment what you need to incur whenever you talk about a business. And this operating leverage ultimately backed by the investment decision which is made by the firm, that is backed by the financial decision what is required by the firm. Financial decision talks about how they finance their requirement, in what proportion of debt and equity. So there the financial leverage come in picture. Financial leverage talks about when you raise your capital, so in what proportion of debt and equity you have actually raised your capital. Because again, whenever you raise money by debt, you are incurring a risk, that risk which we called as a financial risk. Okay, so we're going to study chapters like financial operating leverage. We'll talk about the chapter called what investment decisions, where we'll study the techniques of capital budgeting decisions like NPV, IIR, payback, discounted payback, ARR, accounting rate of return, to understand these all terminologies in much more efficient way. But as in whenever we talk about a firm, whenever we are talking about a firm, how a firm can actually grow, when you look into the firm, how a firm actually grow in the future. So there are these parameters, the decisions altogether. We have different departments. We have production department, we have marketing department, we have human resource department, we have supply chain department, we have all, market, all other departments, whatever we have. Okay, whatever these departments, whatever we have, ultimately all these departments, when they're working either to work on long term viability of the company, or either to work on the basic working capital management of the company. And altogether the managerial decisions, whatever is being taken, there they talk about investment decision, financing decision, dividend decision, liquidity decision. Liquidity decision is all about how we can talk about the management of working capital, the management of current assets and the current liabilities. How we can talk about the management of current assets and current liabilities. So the management of current assets and current liabilities, they talk about the working capital management of the firm. When we talk about dividend decision basically talks about that at the end of the day, when you get the profit, what should you do with that profit? Should you distribute all the profit to your shareholder, or you should keep some saving, the saving which is called a retained earning. So this retained earning, what you save as a firm year on year basis, this retained earning, when you put in your shareholder equity side, under the reserve and surplus account, so these return earning year on year basis, when you will accumulate, that will form reserve and surplus for the company. So this reserve and surplus of the company is also called as internal equity of the firm. So tomorrow, if the firm really need money, so they can use this internal equity. Internal equity is what? Very simple. It's like a saving. So tomorrow, if you need some urgency of the fund, so what you should do? Should you go in the market and start asking people for the money, or you start selling your assets to get the money, or you first try to use your saving? So definitely every individual will try to use the saving, whatever they have, so that they can come up with this contingency situation. So that is what a firm also do. So if a firm can save some part of their profit, okay, they should not give to the shareholder. If they can save some part of their profit, ultimately on year basis, which we call as reserve and surplus, retained earning, which you keep saving, it is called as reserve and surplus. So this reserve and surplus will act like a internal equity of the firm. More reserve and surplus you have in your capital structure, more strong a firm becomes. So that is the equity. No, when I say debt equity ratio, so equity side, these factors comes. So more is your reserve and surplus, more it looks stronger as a firm for you. Okay, and it more will be the value of your firm in the market. Okay, and that way, tomorrow if you really as a firm you want to raise money from the market, you get the money easily, because you have better reserve and surplus account, because you have better internal equity. The growth of the firm, when we talk about the growth of a firm, so the growth of the firm ultimately depends upon the internal equity what the firm have. So we have different departments. All these departments work together for a sole objective, for the betterment of the firm in the long run, with the continuation R&D. At the same time, as the financial decisions, when we talk about short-term decisions also, we talk about long-term decisions also. So long-term decisions can be as an your investment decision, it can be either your financial decision, it can be related to your dividend decision. Altogether, these decisions will impact the firm in the long run. So these financial functions, they are backed by investment reason, or financing reason, or dividend reason, or liquidity decision. They ultimately will help the firm in the long run. Okay, because we need to see how it is being done. There's always a trade-off between the liquidity parameter and profitability parameter. So if how you can work on both of them at the same time, liquidity and when we talk of liquidity, there if you talk about too much of liquidity decisions, like too much of current assets, if I try to engage myself by having too much of inventory, then will that inventory will really will generate the profitability? Okay, how we can work on the management of inventory, that itself is a parameter or the question which we really need to look into that. Yesterday I talked about the policies which were adopted by Japanese manufacturing firms, like the policies of Kaizen, the policy of lean manufacturing, the policies of total quality management. So these all policies actually help the manufacturing setup, where all together they talked about how they can work on the management of inventory, and at the same time how they can make sure that there's always the product is available for the customer whenever the requirement comes. Okay, so that also is very important. Having a longer gestation period for the product, for our product in the end market, is also not good. Although maybe if we have a product which have lot of value in the market, value in the sense lot of people are interested to really be the part of our product, they want to buy our product. Maybe you can take example of Royal Enfield bikes or something like that. So but imagine if you keep a waiting period of 6 months, 1 year, like in that case, probably if you have a very royal customer, definitely they can will wait for. Otherwise, you know that we have lot of competitors and they have similar product in the similar price range or maybe lower price range, comparatively to the product what we are gonna issue to them. So automatically the switching of our, what you say, the brand equity can also happen. So that thing can be avoided if you have a better manufacturing setup model, which can talk about the link or the chain between the demand for the end product and how we can work on our inventory model. So inventory model, to work on inventory model, we have subject like strategic cost management, we have subject like operation management, where aggressively we talk about the what you say, the manufacturing lineup, these manufacturing lineup which can help the firm in the long run. So we here in the subject financial management, we are not getting into details of other parameters, but more or less we'll study the basics of working capital management. And along with studying the basics of working capital management, we also look into these parameters related to investment decision or financial decisions, or related to dividend decisions, how all together can help a firm to grow in the long run. So I've given you a basic understanding about how we can study the nature of financial management, or how financial management is actually impacting us. So we need to study corporate finance, and when we study the corporate finance, we need to look into the idea how a corporate can function. So we need to look into the lot of bankruptcies which has happened in the past, and what kind of lessons we can learn from them. Either it was a bankruptcy of Enron, either it's a bankruptcy of Satyam, either it was a bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers. So what all lessons we can learn from them? Like when I was talking about Lehman Brothers, I told you that we need to learn the importance of liquidity management. So liquidity management, which normally the firms, especially the banks, were never taken care about them. So they started looking into liquidity management once the scenario of bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers came. So there are something called Basel norms and regulation. There's something called Basel norms and regulation, which every banks around the world has to meet. So Okay, so banks around the world, to avoid a bankruptcy, they came up with Basel One. Initially, they came in Basel One, then they came up with Basel Two. They came up with Basel Two. Now, after 2008 subprime financial crisis, now they came up with Basel Three norms and regulations. So these Basel norms and regulations ultimately talked about the different forms of the risk, what a firm, or basically the more better word would be what a bank can have. So the risk what the bank can have, so and how these risks can be minimized, so how this risk can be minimized. So these all were discussed whenever there's a meeting of the banking regulatory body in a place called Basel in Switzerland, and they basically talked about how we can avoid the possibility of bankruptcies. So how we can work on the possibility of bankruptcies by the bank, because banks are the backbone of economy. Because the banks are the backbone of economy, at the same time banks are also companies. So bank works under the Banking Regulation Act. The bank also works under Companies Act. So as in a company, every company talk about maximization of profit. Okay, although they say or they don't say, they definitely, because of competition, they work on the maximization of profit. And when they work on the maximization of profit, then how you can make sure that they should not get bankrupt, because a company bankruptcy is very different from bank bankruptcy. So the events, like I still remember 2008-9, at that time I was doing my MBA. That time when the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy happened, then a rumor also started coming about the bankruptcy of ICCI Bank. So a lot of people were standing in queue outside the ICCI Bank to withdraw their money in the ICCI Bank account, worrying about the future of ICCI Bank. Suddenly that rumor started happening, because after the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers, the reason, what was the reason for that rumor? So the reason for that rumor was actually the UK arm of ICICI Bank has done some investment in the Lehman Brothers mini bonds. So I'm not going to talk about mini bonds and all. If you're really interested, you can read about themselves. So so in UK arm of Lehman Brothers has actually done some investment there, and here what happened, uh, because of RBI can govern the functioning of Indian companies. Okay, in the governing of Indian banks within the Indian parameters. Okay, they make sure that bank does not get too much aggressive. But imagine in the UK arm of the Indian bank, you done some investment, and then because that Lehman Brothers got bankrupt, now this bank is facing problem. So certain things does not, even then how powerful the RBI become, RBI could not able to make a check on that, because now we are living in the world of global village, and because of all that reason, this ICICI Bank was like, there as such no problem. Yeah, definitely there would be a loss of the investment, but at the same time it does not impacted them that significantly. But rumors ultimately impact in long run. You understand, nowadays every company is a public limited company. Every company is listed in the stock market, and the news about the company ultimately impact the stock performance. So nowadays the subject which we are studying is behavioral finance. Okay, so there's nothing called quantitative finance. When you see stock market, okay, when we see stock market, I'm very good with maths, I'm very good with finance. I can read between the lines, I can read the accounting statement of the company, I can do ratio analysis, I can talk about liquidity ratio, leverage ratio, profitability ratio, activity ratio of the firm. That way I can figure it out, the price equity value of the company. I can figure out the price to earning ratio of the firm. All that I can do, and with that I can do a comparative analysis of a firm with its competitor, and that way I can decide that is this firm is really worth to invest or not. But my maths, my knowledge of finance may not work in the real market because in the real market the other players don't do the kind of quantitative analysis what I'm trying to do before a company to understand the nature of the investment of the company. Normal individual go with the herd mentality of buying anything which price is going up, or start selling anything which price started going down, depending upon the news, the depending upon the rumor which comes in the market. And ultimately all this gonna impact will impact the company very significantly. You heard of recent incident of Cristiano Ronaldo during an press meet during the UEFA Cup. He simply put Coca-Cola bottle down and he just said that okay, use water. So that impacted $4.4 billion of the market value of Coca-Cola. So think like that, how this has actually happened. So it's like, so it's all about the news. So now as a company, that's okay. That if a Coca-Cola value goes down by $4.4 billion, definitely maybe in future again the Coca-Cola, again it's a public limited company, the price goes down, again it will go up. But think about the same perspective of a bank. Can you really allow a bank to do such a swinging action, and like such a momentum? Can you allow in a bank as such, like country like India, where majority of people believe on keeping the money in the saving bank account? People in India don't go aggressively on stock market or in mutual funds or derivatives. They prefer bank FD more than anything else. So can you allow bankruptcies in our country? Even then after so much regulations, we see a lot of bankruptcies in the past. We have seen incidents of what happened in Yes Bank. We have seen incident about what happened in IDFC. We have seen incident about what happened in HDIL, the ILFS. There are lot of the lot of case studies are there, which if we start investigating means we are gone. ILFS, ILFS, what has happened in ILFS crisis? So there are so many incidents are there. If you start reading about them, what actually happened in ILFS, if you there's so many are there. So even then RBI is doing so much aggressive, but even then RBI cannot control these events. So there's a place in Basel in Switzerland where the banks around the world, they come and meet. They talk about the forms of risk what they are having right now. They discuss about the perspective of risk, the either it's liquidity risk or market risk or operational risk. They talked about different market disciplines, the different logics of creating and buffer for the risky assets whatever they have in the market, and that way these provisions can somehow help them in the crisis situation. So how much these Basel norms are actually become successful, that itself is a questionable uh, argument to be work on. But even then when we see the way these bodies like Basel, how they have done, they have actually somehow made sure that the problems of bankruptcies can be avoided. So for the firm, bankruptcy is a very big issue. So and because we need to look into how a liquidity or the solvency of a company need to be done. So we cannot talk about immortality. Okay, so we say that a firm will remain for infinite period in the future. That is the assumption in accountancy about a company. So that way firm will remain always for the infinite period. But that infinite period, in order to make sure that infinite period remain infinite, for that the bodies like SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, the bodies like RBI, Reserve Bank of India, so these regulatory bodies have to do a lot of hard work. And along with these bodies, there are a lot of international bodies also there who make sure that the firm always have a visibility in the future, because that visibility ultimately can make sure that as such the economy will grow, because the growth of economy also depends upon the growth of firms in which is existing in that economy. Now we see US. why US is such a big major economy is mainly because of the MNCs, the multinational corporation from USA. They are dominating in the rest of the world. They have presence in majorly in many of the countries, and they keep transacting between their local currency with that country currency, thereby always creating a demand for the US dollar in the international market. And when US dollar always have a demand in the international market, then automatically the Federal Reserve in USA keep printing dollar. Okay, they keep printing dollar, dollar, dollar. What is dollar? Dollar is a currency. It's a paper. Fiat money system. It's a paper. It's a paper. It's a paper which is being authorized by the central bank of that country to be used for a medium of exchange. That paper is having a store of value. That paper can be used in the future as a medium of the exchange. That paper has a value in present. That paper had value in the, and that paper will have value in the future. So that paper, if imagine if Reserve Bank of India also start printing paper, do you really think that that paper will have value? No, because liquidity is not there for Indian rupee. Okay, so you can't imagine that you go to Venezuela or you go to Mexico with the Indian rupee, or you think that people in Venezuela or Mexico will take that rupee from you and give you some unit of goods. So imagine you go to Scotland and with Indian rupee and give some guy in Scotland, say give this 1 lakh Indian rupee and give me 1 kg rice. Do you think that the guy in Scotland would be really interested? But the same thing you can do with US dollar. You can go any part of the world, and you can use that as a medium of exchange. Why you can use? Because US dollar had that value. It have that liquidity parameter. Because of that reason only, whenever any financial scenario crisis comes, or whenever there's a problem about employment comes in US government, Federal Reserve in US, which is like a central bank of our country, that country start printing lot of money. And that way they made sure that the economy come out from the crisis situation. Like right now, because of Corona epidemic, when unemployment data in USA went up very high, then what Federal Reserve did? They made sure that the people should not remain hungry there. So they started printing dollar and start giving free dollar to the people of the country on the name of certain economic activities. And that way they made sure the end person get the dollar, and that end person, when he or she use the dollar in the market, then automatically the liquidity will be managed. Then ultimately when the transaction of good and services happen, then also ultimately the economy can be run. To run the economy, it is very important that you transact. If you stop doing transaction, then your economy will go in question mark. Imagine what happened in India after demonetization. So that for the economy, for the companies to run, it is very important that we do transactions. The transaction can be financial transaction. The transaction can be based on real demand reason transactions, but we should keep doing transaction. And when we do transaction, when the money exchanges its hand from one person to the other person, automatically the demand for the product in the market will create. And when the demand for the product in the market will get created, then automatically the manufacturing setup of a company can work. The manufacturing setup of a company which is waiting for the demand, it can work. And when it work, it give employment to the people. When it give employment to the people, then people will generate salary. When people get the salary, then they use the same salary for again creating additional demand for the product. And altogether, when these happen, people pay tax. When people pay tax, government will get the money. When government will get the money, government can use that money for the more social development work. Government can create a better room for the investment in the economy. So we are open economy. Why the country like US or other UK, they're saying that we are open economy. Any companies can come and do business in our country. We have flexible taxation policies. We give lot of room for the investment. So a lot of companies can come to us and they can do investment. So when they do investment, altogether economy will grow. When economy will grow, when individuals will grow, a lot of companies from around the world will get attracted and do investment. Like Tesla came to India. Okay, now why Tesla came to India? Tesla is already in China from many years. Now why Tesla came to India? Because Tesla can see a lot of demand for automobile industry in our country. Every Indians want to have a car. Every Indian want automobile, two-wheeler. From two-wheeler, they go to four-wheeler because having four-wheeler is a pride. So if the Tesla knows that part. Tesla knows that parameter that having four-wheeler is a pride for Indian households. So, and nowadays, because of skyrocketing of the prices of petroleum product, automatically everyone will look for alternate approach as in electric cars, electric automobile, and definitely they will, India having world's second largest population with a mentality that we need automobile to make sure that we have economic value, will definitely will prefer electric vehicle if that can be offered at little bit lesser value, and then automatically the other end of the company will make lot of revenue. So that is how the business model works. If there's a demand, automatically there will be a company which satisfy the demand. So demand should be created. Some demand are backed by real reasons, some demand are backed by artificial reason, because of want, because of this, because of satisfying the societal pressure. To do that, ultimately a company grows. So when a company grows, either the company can be domestic backed company, the companies can be foreign backed companies. So automatically, when as a company grows, the economy grows. So the question comes in the mind of many people that how production can even the part of the financial decisions of a firm. So guys, you need to understand how will you do production. So to do production, you can be two kinds of producer. Who do production? Those who are producers. A producer can be a farmer. So imagine if you are a farmer, so you are growing in your farm, you are growing seeds, and from the seeds you are getting a plant, and from the plant what you'll have, when you sell in the market, you generate revenue. So you can be a producer. That way you need to grow plant, you have to do harvesting. Okay, you have to sowing the beads, seeds of the plant in the soil. For that you need to incur a cost. So that even then, if imagine you have the seeds, imagine I have eaten mango and now I have the mango seed. Now I can put in the soil and then the mango tree will come. But in order to get that, I need to incur a cost, because although the seed is now free for me, I'm not putting it under this head, that I'm assuming that they are two different heads. Now I get free seed, assuming as in. So even then, if I get that seed, now when I employ that seed into the soil, then doing basic homework of fertilizers, pesticide or insecticides in the gradually initial days, and then what you say, the year on year basis of taking care that that small seed can turn into big tree. Okay, assuming it's tree, it's not herb or herbs, and then it start doing the production. It requires a gestation period, and in order to engage that gestation period, in order to work on that opportunity cost, I need to incur a cost, which is my production cost. Here I'm talking with the perspective of agribusiness. Now come to the manufacturing setup. So if you are into manufacturing setup, how production can be the part of finance? Because guys, you need to understand that the management of inventory is a big headache of every company. Okay, you are having too much inventory. Raw material can be perishable in nature, it can be non-perishable in nature. In case if your inventory is a perishable in nature, then you need to incur a lot of cost to maintain, to work on the storage of that inventory. Okay, so if you are working on some kind of business, like you heard of business model of Lysias, which gives non-vegetarians raw material. Like if I want to buy fish, I can place an order in Lysias, and Lysias are fresh to eat. They will deliver non-veg to my home. Fish, meat, whatever egg I want, they will deliver. So there the parameter which comes is the freshness. Is the product is really fresh or not? If the product is not fresh, will definitely will not go with that online segment which is providing us. So how Lysias make sure that they always provide a fresh chicken or fresh meat or fresh fish to the end consumer. So for that, they need to have very strong linkage between the two model. From one model which talks about order creation, from the moment the order is being generated by the end consumer, that I'm looking for this much. Okay, and then there's another model, there's another end which talks about the inventory setup. The moment when the order is placed, do you really have that fresh raw material which you can deliver to them after employing some kind of little bit of other setups related to manufacturing? So can you actually do that? Can you make a link between these two models? Can that happens? So for that, lot of vertical mergers and acquisitions are done by a firm, some firm which actually engage in such a product which is very perishable in nature. So they need to have a contact with the primary producer. Okay, that primary producer should give them the very fresh, probably in the case of non-vegetarian food, very fresh raw material which can be delivered to them. If you see the business model of Walmart is known for giving product to the end consumer at the least cost. So how Walmart able to do that? So what is the reason for that? Now I go to there's a shopping complex next to my home called Big Market. Then there's something called Sana Supermarket. Then I have MK Ahmed. So nowadays when I go to MK Ahmed or Sana or Big Market, I see in that product lineup, like if suppose they want to buy salt, so I can see salt of Tata, I can see the salt of other big MNCs. Along with that, I can see the salt of MK Ahmed also. So what they are doing, they are going backward and they are contacting or they are having their own manufacturing setup, so that probably they can have the same product with same quality at little bit lesser cost, so that the end consumer can give preference to their product, and definitely they will give preference. So production altogether is the most important setup with any company need to engage right now, to make sure they can be competitive in the future, to make sure in the horizontal market segment where we are living in the world of highly competitive scenario, we always have an edge over our competitors. Imagine if I'm only producing and if I'm only selling. I hope you are understanding what I'm trying to say. So if
Yes, sir.
and you are the seller, there's no third party engaged in selling your product. So automatically you always have a upper advantage, and you can have your own sales force which pitch in your product over the your competitor or big MNC product whenever any consumer come to your shop. So that is how we all are right now talking about. You are seeing actors are becoming producers. I don't know how much of you track Bollywood or Tollywood. Now it is very common. Big actors, they all have their own production house. So you're getting me. Production, the setup, everything can be done from one end only. From one what you say, from one line of business activity, from the production to consumption can be done. And that way the revenue, whatever is being generated, maybe the end product is given at little bit lesser price to the end consumer, but even then I will not get impacted, because I am actually engaged in all the product line, the development of product setup. I am the only person who's engaged in. So that way it always give me a competitive advantage over others in the actual market segment. I hope you are getting this.
Yes, sir.
Any other question, guys? So why a company do IPO? Anyone? Why a company need to work on the IPO, initial public offering?
So your question? Why a
Why a
company?
company do IPO, initial public offering?
Initial, maybe to get in finance, their capital investments.
Yeah, they need capital investment. So you can get capital by private equity firms. You can get capital by debt also. So why I need to come up with an IPO? Because if I come in with an IPO, I need to transform myself into public company, and then I need to disclose each and everything to the public. I cannot hide anything from anyone.
Okay. Maybe because in the public they issue their you maybe in terms of shares and dividends, and they get more capital, because in private they are limited, but public it is more open. Maybe that in terms of investment.
No, because everyone want no little bit of privacy. You are getting as an individual, you want privacy. The company also, it will always be good if they have a privacy.
Yeah, so but in a private limited company,
Hmm.
they will not get as much funds. They cannot, raise their capital, initial capital, when compared to a public.
Anyone else? Any opinion? See, raising fund is not a big thing. We have companies like private equity firms like Sequoia Capital or Blackstone Group. There are a lot of big private equity firms are there who can give you as much fund as you want. But guys, you need to understand one thing, that if you keep doing, like suppose if you have a requirement of money, you can raise money by two ways, either by equity, either by debt. No one is telling you to raise always money by equity. You can borrow money. If you borrow money, you don't have to give the part of ownership to the other person. So whenever you borrow money, you don't have to give your ownership to anyone. You are still having the complete ownership. You just need to pay them interest and your work will be done. You'll say, no, I don't want to do that, because if I go by the debt mode, then probably, then what happens? Then I'm taking a risk as in that I need to pay interest no matter I get a profit or loss. So you'll say, no, I'll not go with the debt mode. I'll go with equity mode. So equity mode, you can go with and raise money from private individuals. So whenever you raise no private issue, whenever you do private issue from private equity firms or through venture capitalist, or if you do seed financing, then that is called private placement. Please remember the word. We'll call this as a private placement. We call that the term is given to that. That is called private placement. That is what right now Facebook is doing. That is what right now the ATM was doing till now. Okay. Okay, so that was very common. That was very common ideology of a firm to work on. When we do private placement with with individuals, with companies like QIB, there's a altogether big financial houses which we call as qualified institutional buyers. Which we call as qualified. We call them as a qualified institutional buyer. When this is being done through them, then it is called as QIP, qualified institutional placement. Then the same thing will call as a qualified institutional placements. Okay, so what is the big deal? Why we cannot always go with private issue? What is wrong with that? So that the reason, guys, you need to understand, if you keep diluting your ownership and you're giving your ownership to certain set of one firm, it's like that. So like if you talk about Paytm, 30% of the ownership is acquired by Ant Group. So automatically they will become the decision maker of your firm. If Ant Group tomorrow want, they can hold a board of directors meeting and they can say that we want to sell Paytm to some XYZ company. And that time Vijay Shekhar Sharma cannot say anything. Although he started the firm, he run the firm, he is everything for the firm, he cannot do anything because the decision maker are Ant Group, because they are having 30% ownership. Are you getting me? So if you keep doing diluting to certain set of individuals or only one set of particular company, you are actually giving all the decision making right to that set of individuals. And ultimately, the fortune of your company will be determined by them, not by you. I hope you're understanding. You've seen a lot of incident in the past, how what happened to Dell, what happened to Apple. Steve Jobs, he left Apple, he went to India, and he was in Haridwar, Kashi for many days. And then again he went back. He then again Lee joined Apple. They throw him out of the Apple. So it doesn't matter. You started the firm, all that. Once you are having ownership by other firm or other individuals. So anytime a CEO or the owner can turn into something else. I hope you're understanding. So when instead of private issue, guys, if you actually go with public issue instead of private issue, guys, if you actually go with public issue, you actually go with public issue whenever you are raising money by equity. So then you have lot of mode available with you. You can do IPO, initial public offering, or you can do right issue, you can do IPO, or you can do right issue, or you can do FPO, follow on public offering. So by these ways, what you are doing, you are actually engaging the normal public to be the part of your company. So when you actually engage the normal public to be the part of your company, so that way the dilution happens of the ownership pattern. Then if imagine if no one is having the majority of stake in the company, then decision making will get diluted. And that way, as an owner, as an owner, you can always have a stronghold on the company, and you can decide about the future of the company. No one in the future, there's a less probability that your firm can be acquired by some third party firm if that third party firm is actually trying to work on some aggressive acquisition of your firm. I hope you are understanding. So it's become very easy. Paytm can be very easily can be acquired by the other firm if the other firm can agree or convince End Group to sell their ownership to them. So then Vijay Shekhar Sharma cannot do anything. I'm just giving you one example. Are you getting this? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Others, any doubt, any question?
No, sir.
So, so guys, this much we'll do in this class now. I believe Shane has taken the attendance. Okay, guys. So I'll discuss more in the next class. Okay. So any question you want to ask before I conclude today's session?
No question.
No, sir. Thanks.
I hope you people like the class. It was interesting class for you people. I hope it was knowledgeable to you people. You learned something from the class. So my hard work, my intention is to make sure that at the end of the day, my student will feel learned something today. So I hope the same with you people. You have learned something with that intention. I like to say goodbye to all of you. Abhilash, Pooja, Sangeeta, Shane, Vanishri, Vikas, Yashaswini. So thank you everyone. Thank you for joining the class. I'll see you all then next class very soon, probably next weekend. Thank you everyone. God bless you. Take care everyone. See you soon.
Thank
Thank
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.